So I ordinarily speak very briefly, and you're going to be disappointed if you're expecting a brief speech. Every graduation speech I gave for 21 years had a reference to a country song, and there are no country songs in today's speech. This is going to be a little bit different. I'm sure you're saying to yourself, what does this old man have to say to me? When I think about this, the person who would be addressing me in your position would have graduated in the year 1908. That is frightening, and so I have to make sure that I have to say something important. Even though life has changed for the past 50 years, truth has not changed. The truth has remained the same. Lies, on the other hand, are continually evolving, and that's why they're so interesting. There's a constant evolution of lies. Mark Twain once said, "A lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth is able to put on its shoes." I'm going to keep my stories of the past to a minimum. This is the 175th anniversary of Jesuit High School. When I started teaching, it was the 125th anniversary. And Jesuit High School was in turmoil in those years. There were different parts of the faculty just at odds with each other, and faculty meetings were really a disgrace in the anger that was being surfaced. Because the two sides were stuck in an ideology, each on the other side, constantly complaining about each other, and that filtering on to the students. It was a horrendous situation. Turbulent times at Banks and Carrollton because they let ideological conflict get in the way of their mission. I have great gratitude for Paul Schott and Harry Thompson, the two Jesuits who came in to rectify the situation. They established Jesuit as the school that we know now and it had been over that difficult time. So I thank them. And I thank you, the class of 2023, for what you have done and what you will do, and all the other alumni here. I need to express my gratitude to you for who you are and what you make this school to have been. You know, the things that unite us and we have in common are much more than the things that divide us. Not just us as Blue Jay alumni, but all the people we deal with. We have much more in common with people than the things that divide us. And remember that, as I'll say many other things that I think you should remember. Make a daily practice to be grateful. Thank your friends, your parents. Thank your competitors and your rivals, because they bring out the best in you. This year, many people will say to you, your years at Jesuit are the most important years of your life. Now, I've said this before, generations past, that's a lie. Next year is the most important year of your life, because you will not have the guidance and supervision of the people who have guided you and supervised you for 18 years. You are able to make your choices. That's why I say it can be a dangerous year, or it can be a very fulfilling year. As all things, the choice is yours. You'll have great independence, but you need to know that there are boundaries. There are boundaries to your independence. I'm going to talk today about 3 ideologies. And they're not really, you won't see them in a book or anything, but 3 frames of thinking. And I'm going to talk about them. The problem with ideology is it's a partial truth. It takes what's true and magnifies it and makes it more important than what it is. Marxism is based on a truth. There has been conflict between classes in history. It's true. But it does not explain everything. And that's where it goes wrong. Because ideologies, false ones, take a small bit of truth and they say that explains everything. That's the problem with ideology. And that's why I'm warning you against it. The 3 most dangerous words in the English language: all, every, and always. You really cannot say a sentence where that is true. Be very careful when you use the word every, all, and always. Be very careful about that, because they can lead you also to dangerous thinking, like all or nothing thinking. I'm either a total success or I'm a total failure. Overgeneralization. Every time I meet that person, he insults me. Or labeling. What a fool, what an idiot. This man never said anything of any sense. Jumping to conclusions. All those kinds of mental ways of looking at the world are based upon taking one thing and exaggerating its importance and letting it dominate our thoughts. There is a battle for truth every day. Every day is a battle for truth. Jesus says, the truth will set you free. And because the truth will set you free, that is why truth is under attack. People do not want you to be free. That's why truth is under attack. That's why people use fear. They take a truth and they exaggerate it to intimidate you and make you feel concerned and therefore under their control. Unscrupulous use of fear is causing people unnecessary anxiety. Be skeptical when people try to make you fear. Be very skeptical. Because especially young people, you are much more open to these kinds of fears. Sometimes you hear people talk about my truth. That's a red flag. When someone says my truth, you need to say immediately in your mind, rubbish. You and I, we all know a better word for that, but I can't use it, it's being taped. My truth, rubbish. Those who use that word are either manipulative and trying to manipulate you, or else they're self-deceived. There is no such a thing as my truth. It is true or it's false. My truth says, I'm demanding you to believe what I believe. You don't have to do that. Do not fall for that. In evaluating ideologies, there's one standard you could use, the sense of humor. Does this ideology encourage laughter and humor and good feeling? Or are its adherents unhappy, angry, and vengeful? Watch out for a frame of thinking where the people are unhappy and angry and vengeful. That can't be truth. Or if it is truth, they're exaggerating it in the wrong way. Beware of ideologies that empower the lunatic fringe, that normalize disorder and chaos, and glorify mental disorders. Just beware of those kinds of ideologies if you run into them. Now, I'm going to talk about three different ideologies, or really ways of looking at the world. And they're not really ideologies, but they're ways of thinking. The first is autonomy. And each of these three ways of thinking, there is a truth. But people expand the truth beyond what is true. There's a truth in autonomy. We need to develop a healthy independence. Your parents have guided you, and you're able now to go off into college and so forth with a sense of healthy independence. But independence must always exist within boundaries. Otherwise, it becomes chaos. You no longer depend upon your parents. A healthy autonomy observes boundaries. An unhealthy autonomy says, as the Greek word autonomos, I am the law, I make the rules. No, you do not make the rules, you do not make the truth. There is no such thing as your truth. A lot of lies we get told, and they go back so far, even my generation heard these lies. You can be anything you want to be. Rubbish. And if you believe that, you're thoroughly self-deceived. You can't be anything you want to be. That's obvious. Now, the meaning behind that is don't put unnecessary limits on your ambitions. That's great. That's what it means, yes. But otherwise, you cannot be anything you want to be. The problem is the feeling for being entitled is what leads us to a desire for unhealthy autonomy. I can be anything I want. I can ingest anything I want. Eat, smoke, drink it, whatever. I can indulge all my desires and appetites. There'll be no consequences because I don't think there are any boundaries, because I'm autonomous. The truth is, we cannot ignore the laws of nature. Much as we like to, we cannot ignore the laws of nature. I may wake up one morning and feel like I'm a bird, and identify as a bird, but I can't fly. And if I do try to, I will fall, because gravity is a law of nature. Personal autonomy requires personal responsibility. The reality is there are natural boundaries in human life. We want to be autonomous, but we have to observe the boundaries that the natural law presents to us. And many of you talked to me before, who are alumni or staff of the school, and said, are you going to tell them they're special? Of course not, because you're not special. Anyone who tells you you're special is a liar, and they're full of rubbish. You are not special. You're just like everybody else. And you're special to your mother, I hope, and your father, I hope, and your sisters maybe sometimes, but you're not special. That frame of mind leads you to make all sorts of horrendous decisions. You're not special and you're not entitled, so give up that frame of thinking. Autonomy is not the same as freedom. Take that person who's addicted. Addicted people get that way because they've exercised their autonomy to a degree that's unhealthy. And so they've made choices that leads to their loss of freedom. So my prayer for you is that you exercise autonomy within the proper boundaries. The truth is, you are autonomous, but there are boundaries. The second frame of mind, mentality, is perfectionism. And to a certain degree, there's a truth in wanting things to be perfect. I obviously want my doctor to be perfect. When he performs back surgery on me, I want to make sure he's counted exactly what he's operating on, or whatever he's operating on. I expect the engineers who build bridges to work out their calculations perfectly. There's no margin for error there. Engineers, surgeons, we want them to be perfect. 95% is not good enough when dealing with marital fidelity. People expect 100%. Perfectionism is a frame of mind, however, that can become distorted and exaggerated, and that's where it leads to problems. It can lead to procrastination. It has to be perfect, so I'm going to put off doing it. Or we can have unrealistic expectations. Another bit of rubbish that many people see at graduation: go out and change the world. Because the world isn't good enough, but with you, we can make it perfect. More and more rubbish. Okay, I used to tell the parents, first night meeting with new parents, I tell the parents, you have a moral obligation to let your children experience frustration, disappointment, and defeat. Because that's how we grow and learn. If we didn't experience frustration, disappointment, defeat, we would never change. We would never grow. We would never become better. That's why parents have a moral obligation to allow you to experience that. And my hope is for you that Jesuit High School has given you a ton of frustration, disappointment, and defeat. Because we're doing our job. And it's your job, furthermore, to help those people that you're dealing with to experience it. It doesn't take a lot of your way to do it, but it's going to happen as part of nature. You know, I only mentioned two things in the past. One of my favorite lines in 40 years of dealing with adolescents and their parents. My son is devastated because he's playing right field and not shortstop. Now, the child was 7, age appropriate. 18? No. And the word devastated, which has come into our language, simply means disappointed. Disappointment, frustration, defeat are part of our lives, and the more we learn to deal with that, the better it's going to be for us. So I encourage you to, when you experience frustration, disappointment, defeat, ask yourself, how is this challenging me to grow? How is it challenging me to change? So let's not try to make everything absolutely perfect. Another problem with perfectionism is we start comparing ourselves with others. One of the most unhealthy psychological things we can do is to compare ourselves with others. It leads to demoralization, anger at oneself, anger at others, envy. And so that's a problem when we are constantly comparing ourselves with others. And that's something we need to control. Perfectionism also involves not just our own being perfect, but controlling others. And that's where it really gets dangerous. If you have a perfectionistic family member or a perfectionistic boss, it can be very difficult in your life. Perfecting society is an illusion, and it's impossible. These kinds of utopian ideologies deny the reality of sin, and so they think that human beings can be perfect if we just change the environment, and we do impossible, absolutely impossible. We can never be perfect. Society will never be perfect. And so therefore, when you hear other people say at graduation, go out and change the world, another ton of rubbish. You cannot change the world because you lack the skill, the knowledge, the competence, and the virtue to change the world. It can't be done. So ignore people when they say that because they're just going out and saying more lies. Change yourself first. You want to change the world? Change yourself. When you change yourself, you'll change the people closest to you, perhaps. And they'll see an example. Do not try to change the world. Change yourself first. So beware of perfectionism in people you deal with. A perfectionistic partner is very difficult to deal with, whether that partner be in marriage or that partner be in business. Very difficult to deal with a perfectionistic partner. It can poison relationships, and people try to control you, and they weaken your appropriate autonomy. So a word to the wise, beware of perfectionistic partners. In one way or another, that's the problem with the ideology of perfectionism. A third one is this. Third frame of mind. Self-pity and victimhood. Another very, very common frame of mind, very common ideology. There's a grain of truth. We're all victims to some degree or another. None of us have had a perfect childhood. None of us had perfect experiences in our life. There are all the things that we can point to that say, I was cheated out of this, I've been injured here. We're all victims in some way. Some people are victims, horrendous victims of tremendous injustice, and they've suffered great trauma. I'm not talking about people who suffered really significant trauma in their lives. But the ordinary people, you and I, ordinary people, the truth is, yes, we have been victimized in some way or another, but that's just a small part of reality. The truth is, self-pity gets us nowhere. Makes us worse. So self-pity leads us to depression in a sense of being powerless. And when you're powerless and depressed, you've got to find comfort somewhere. And so I find our comfort in other things. Promiscuity, drugs, alcohol, food, even work. Do not fall into a pattern of self-pity that blames other people for the misfortunes in your life. It's a terrible, terrible thing. Self-pity is kryptonite. And you remember Superman? I know that's missed on you, but anyway. Self-pity is like kryptonite. Reflect on your unhappiness, so it makes you unhappy. Ask yourself this challenging question. How much of that is really due to your own lack of self-discipline? So think about that. That will help you to counteract the tendency to self-pity. The person filled with self-pity will blame others, not accept personal responsibility, and this person will feel powerless, angry, envy, entitled, and of course self-deceived. Self-pity is not a masculine virtue, so I encourage you to avoid it at all costs. Which brings me to the problem you may hear on the news and hear that, the phrase toxic masculinity does not exist. No such thing. There are toxic people who make toxic decisions and have toxic effect on people. But anger, violence, drunkenness, a lack of self-control, and bullying are not masculine. Masculinity is using one's strength, intelligence, courage, and skill to protect and to provide for the vulnerable with self-control. That's what masculinity is. And that's what I encourage you to develop in your life, to be able to use your strength and courage and self-control to protect and provide for those who are vulnerable in some way or another. We're talking about masculinity. I want to end on a medical note, perhaps. And doctors here may say, I don't know what I'm talking about. This has to do with testosterone. If for some strange reason you want to decrease your testosterone, I encourage you to drink about 2 gallons of beer a week, and that will do it to you. As you know, I have a campaign against the early onset of underage drinking, and you're past that age now. But just to remember that there are limits and boundaries, and sometimes when you go beyond those boundaries, it has a terrible effect on us. Another one of the great lies is, I can't change, and so I encourage you to do what you can to change. I want this to be an encouraging talk to let you know that you have the ability to do what is right in your life. You have the ability to be people who are appropriately autonomous, be people who have high standards without being perfectionistic, and people who do have a healthy sense of autonomy. So I encourage you to develop 3 virtues. Gratitude to counteract victimhood. I am grateful for what I've been given. I've been grateful for all the gifts God has given to me, my family has given to me, and I'm grateful to my parents and others. Gratitude. Gratitude even for the challenges, to counteract our sense of victimhood. Humility. The virtue of humility to counteract your perfectionism. No, I don't have to be perfect. No, I don't have to be first. No, I don't have to have all the status and power of the world. I am humble. And thirdly, fidelity. Fidelity to the truth, fidelity to who we are, fidelity to our relationships. That will help us to avoid unhealthy autonomy in our lives. So again, I'd like to thank you for being who you are and what lies ahead of you. There's a great future ahead of you, and I encourage you to think wisely and to be a person who is very much attached to the truth, and a person who, as much as possible, avoids self-deception and falling for the lies that our culture gives to us. So again, thank you very much, and have a good graduation, and my best wishes to the class of 2023.